In Chapter 5, we're going to go over adverb clauses of time. So an adverb clause of time. When the phone rang, the baby woke up. So when the phone rang is an adverb clause of time. An adverb clause is one kind of dependent clause. A dependent clause must be attached to an independent clause or main clause. In the baby woke up is the main clause. So when the phone rang is an adverb clause or a dependent clause, and it means that it's a thought that cannot stand alone. The baby woke up, main clause, that's an independent clause, which means that it is an independent thought that can stand alone. Incorrect. When the phone rang, the baby woke up. So you can't have a period after the dependent clause, because then you end up with a run-on sentence. You have to have when the phone rang, comma, the baby woke up. Or you could have the phone rang, period, the baby woke up. So example B is incorrect because the adverb clause is not connected to the main clause. Example C is correct because there is no adverb clause and the two main clauses are both independent clauses. When the phone rang, the baby woke up. The baby woke up when the phone rang. And so when you have when the phone rang and you have the dependent clause at the beginning of the sentence, then you have a comma. And then when you have the dependent clause at the end of the sentence, you don't have a comma. But both of them have the same exact meaning. And so you can always make an adverb clause out of an independent clause by adding a subordinating conjunction or an adverb clause word like when. Okay, so when is what turns this sentence into an adverb clause and into a dependent clause. And so here, add necessary punctuation and capitalization. Identify adverb clauses and main clauses. And so here, when Sam was in New York, he stayed with his cousins. So when Sam was in New York, he stayed with his cousins. When we went inside when it began to rain. So here you need a capital W. It began to rain, we went inside. When it began to rain, we went in. So you need to have when. Okay, so that's how you do that exercise. Using adverb clauses to show time relationships. After she graduates, she will get a job. After she had graduated, she got a job. A present tense, not a future tense, is used in an adverb clause. So we don't use future tense in the adverb clause. I will leave before he comes. I had left before he came. When I arrived, he was talking on the phone. When I got there, he had already left. When it began to rain, I stood under a tree. When I was in Chicago, I visited the museums. When I see him tomorrow, I will ask him. So notice the different time relationships expressed by the different tenses. And so when you have, while I was walking home, it began to rain. As I was walking home, it began to rain. So here you have while or as. So that means that these two things are happening at the same time. While I was walking home happened at the same time as it began to rain. As I was walking home happened at the same time as it began to rain. So here you show time is happening at the same time. And here, when I arrived at that moment, he was talking on the phone. When I got there at that moment in time, he had already left. So here you have things that happen at a particular moment in time. When it began to rain, I stood under a tree. So here you have the completed action of it starts to rain and then you stand under a tree. By the time he arrived, we had already left. By the time he comes, we will have already left. So this means that one action happened before another action. So we had already left happened first. Then, by the time he arrived, because had left is past perfect, and a past perfect tense is always the past action that happens first. In other words, past perfect is always more into the past than another past action. For example, I had brushed my teeth. I had taken a shower before I put on my clothes. So had taken a shower is the past perfect. Past perfect always comes first before another past action. So anytime you have a perfect tense, the perfect tense always happens before another action. What is a perfect tense? Present perfect, she has arrived. Past perfect, she had arrived. Future perfect, she will have arrived. So in all of those perfect tenses, the perfect tense have plus a past participle or have plus a present tense of the verb, all of this always happens before another action happens. And so here, by the time he arrived, past tense. So by the time he arrived at 5 o'clock, we had already left at 4:30. So had already means it happened first. And so by the time he comes, we will have already left. So by the time he comes at 6 o'clock, we will have already left at 5 o'clock. So you have one action happening before another action, always with the perfect tense. So by the time is one event is completed before another action starts. Notice the use of the past perfect and future perfect in the main clause. So anything with perfect tenses means that something has already happened. I haven't seen him since he left this morning. So that means that by the time I got there, he was already gone. So I haven't seen him. So from this time to the present, he's just not there. I've known her ever since I was a child. So when you have the present perfect is something that happened a little bit into the past and still continuing into the future. We stayed there until we finished our work. We stayed there till we finished our work. So until is to that time and then no longer. Till is used more in speaking than in writing. It is generally not used in formal English. So yes, until is used in formal writing, and till is used mainly in speaking. As soon as it stops raining, we will leave. Once it stops raining, we will leave. So as soon as or once is when one event happens, another event happens soon after. So here you have as soon as it stops raining. That means that when the rain stops, then we will leave. So that means that we have to wait for the rain to stop first, and then we can leave. Here we got once it stops raining, that means when the rain stops. So that happens first, and then we leave. So one action happens first, and then right afterwards, another action starts. I will never speak to him again as long as I live. I will never speak to him again, so as long as I live. As long as I live is used more commonly than so as long as I live. So as long as I live sounds more like written English and formal English. So as long as and so as long as means during, all the time, from beginning to end. So that means for my whole life. For the rest of my life is as long as. Whenever I see her, I say hello. So whenever means every time. So every time I see her, I say hello. The first time that I went to New York, I went to an opera. I saw 2 plays the last time that I went to New York. The next time I go to New York, I'm going to see a ballet. So adverb clauses can be introduced by the following: the first time, the second time, the third time, the last time, that. So it can be several actions in sequence, one happening one after the other. After and before are commonly used in the following expressions: shortly after, a short time after, a little while after, not long after, soon after, shortly before, a short time before, a little while before, not long before. And that pretty much covers chapter 5. So if you have any questions about chapter 5, feel free to email me.